Awesome. Thank you very much. Apparently, I am deemed next gen by our friends here at National Clean Energy Week, so I've been asked to moderate the panel called Next Gen Energy, Advancing Clean, Reliable, and Affordable Energy. It sounds like you guys are familiar with the Smart Brevity format, so we'll just dive straight into it. But I have 5 very exciting guests coming up, starting with Chris Phoebus, the Chief Technology Officer at HydroStore. Then we have Lindsay Fitzgerald, the Chief Advocacy and Communications Officer at GEVO, Jackie Siebens, Director of Public Affairs at Helion Energy, Alessandra Milliken, Managing Director of Energy and Infrastructure at Landgate, and then finally, Leslie Jantarasamy, Vice President of Research at the Smart Electric Power Alliance. Chris, let's get started.
Hey, Chris.
Hello. First of all, great name.
I know. It's good to see a fellow Chris here on stage.
Chris squared on stage. Chris, would love for you to kick us off just by giving an overview of HydroStore and the work that you guys are up to.
Yeah, so HydroStore is long-duration energy storage. So effectively what we are advanced compressed air energy storage. And so a lot of you might know compressed air energy storage in general. We're different. And what makes us different at HydroStore is we've combined multiple methods of storage to come up with a really innovative system. And so what they are is if you take the compressed air energy storage that you may be used to, it's typically done in salt caverns and in areas where there's existing caverns. If you take what we do, we put it in hard rock. Now this is important because hard rock is just about everywhere. So the areas that we can put our compressed air is all over the world versus existing caverns. The second thing that we do is we actually take and do sort of like pumped hydro, right? So we take water and we push it up from our caverns. These caverns are 2,000 feet below the surface. So now you've got stored energy in the form of water sitting up 2,000 feet high, similar to pumped hydro. You've got your compressed air. The third thing we do is we take and we store heat energy. So we take the heat from the compression process, we store that thermal energy, and it's ready. So then, as we pull all this out of the system, we have a much more efficient system than traditional compressed air. It's much more locatable than hydro, and of course the thermal coming back makes it an adiabatic process, which makes the efficiency really high. So if you look at what that's done for us at HydroStore, it's given us a really innovative way to do long-duration energy storage. And so as a company, we've come to the point where we have good investment behind this. We have shovel-ready product, and we're bringing it in for these long-duration periods. So that brings us to where we're building these big plants. We have our first plant online already in Ontario. And so by being shovel-ready, what we're doing is we're designing our standard plant of about 500 megawatts, 8 hours of storage. And so if you take this 8 hours of storage, your 500 megawatts, you got about 4 gigawatt hours, well, you got exactly 4 gigawatt hours of available energy. And this is your long duration product. So at HydroStore, that's the basic premise of our product. That's what we've been building. We've got multiple sites coming on. These sites are effectively available in multiple jurisdictions, which we'll talk more about those as we proceed. And we have a diverse supply chain to be able to bring that in.
That's very exciting. I hadn't heard about this concept until learning about your company, and it seems to be very innovative, very unique right now. What are some of the advances that have happened more recently that have kind of enabled some of this technology to start thriving?
Yeah, there's a lot of advances from our own technology, but if you look at the changes in the market over the past couple of years, obviously we've seen a lot of energy transition. We've seen a lot of renewables come into the market. And that renewables creates a lot of intermittent energy, and that creates the requirement really for storage. And so you got short duration storage through batteries. We have a huge gap in the long duration storage. What's really happened over the past year or so, though, and what we're seeing right now as we look forward is growth. So here in the US, we haven't seen a ton of growth over the past couple decades. We haven't seen any real growth over the past couple decades when you compare it to what's being estimated going forward. And we're getting the growth for some really good reasons, right? We're onshoring manufacturing. We've talked about AI and data centers. You know, it's been a big topic for this conference, and how do you get ready for that? Well, all this means that we've got to increase base load. We've got to bring a lot more power in. And again, we've talked a lot about that. But the other thing just to keep in mind is when you think of these new loads that are coming in, they have swings, they have variability that's going to change the market on the consumption side. So now we've got this intermittency on the supply side. On the demand side, we've got more challenging demand in the market, coming into the market. We've got growth estimated at 3 to 5% a year. The gap for long-duration energy storage is becoming bigger and bigger, and as a result, there's a lot more recognition of the importance of long-duration energy storage, and long-duration energy storage that's going to be available fairly quickly. So there's a lot of people working on it, but we're coming forward with a shovel-ready product again.
There's obviously a lot of different aspects of battery or of storage generally, right? So you have batteries, like whether it's lithium or iron, you have pump storage, like you mentioned, and then what you guys are doing. It feels like in this moment where so many more renewables are coming onto the grid, you need to firm those up. I'm curious your thoughts on the scalability of what you're doing. Like, how can you dramatically deploy more of this storage to make sure that you have that baseload availability?
Yeah, so from a scalability perspective, you actually need, we believe that you need a lot of what you mentioned, right? We see ourselves as part of the solution. And when you think of what HydroStore is, the advantage of HydroStore, if you have this intermittency and it's a demand for an hour, it's all based off keeping this grid balance. And if you have intermittency and you lose that balance, the grid doesn't function. So we see the scalability being across the market as part of energy storage in general. Batteries can handle it for minutes, for hours. As you start to get over 6 hours of energy requirements, that's where long-duration energy storage becomes really powerful. And currently, if you look at scalability, in most markets where you have a high level of renewable penetration, you have to have long-duration energy storage to make them affordable and take advantage of the full capability that you've put into these markets. Because today, without long-duration energy storage, a lot of that power can actually just go to waste. So as we scale the product, as we scale our product, we're looking at how easy is it to put into different locations, which is why I highlighted the ability to find hard rock. It's the footprint too. You know, when you think of pumped hydro is an excellent product, but there's only so many places in the world that you can put it because you have to have the water source. It's a huge footprint. We can go around 100 acres, much smaller footprint than something like that. And a relatively traditional power plant that uses, that creates effectively what you would see as a traditional product, both in terms of rotating mass, which is important to balance the grid, because our grids are traditionally balanced based off of rotating mass through synchronous condensers and other type of synchronous balancing. By putting more of that in the grid, you're actually making it easier for the grid operators to do what they need to do. So now you've got easy to locate it, fits really well into the grids that exist today. The grid doesn't need to change to use this type of product, and covers the gap from the variability that's already in the grid. You literally don't have to put another megawatt of renewable energy into this grid to need long-duration energy storage. You need it now. And so I think that makes us very scalable within the existing infrastructure.
Awesome. Last question within a minute here. There's a lot of policymakers and people that are involved in the policy world in this room. What are the lessons that you can share with them from what you've tried to do to kind of pilot this new technology, but also scale it from a commercial perspective?
Yeah, so we've learned so much from our pilot. The most important, I'm our chief technology officer. I focus on technology, so I don't usually get to have these talks, but I will tell you the most important thing that we learned is we de-risked all of our technology. We understand that this technology works. We are grid connected. We are ready to go. What I would want any policymaker to also understand, though, is these are mega projects. We need your support to put them in the ground. We are ready to go. We're shovel ready. We want to build these. We see the support that we've had through the OBBBA for the ITCs to stay in place for long duration energy storage as an endorsement, but we do want continued support as we go forward.
3 seconds left. Let's clap it up in those seconds. All right. Thank you, Chris. Moving along swiftly here to Lindsay Fitzgerald, the Chief Advocacy and Communications Officer with Gevo. Welcome, Lindsay. Kind of feel like a talk show host. It's kind of fun. Welcome, Lindsay.
Hi. I don't think I have any family drama to share.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Maybe next year.
Maybe.
Would love for you to share about the work that you guys are doing at Gevo and your background.
Yeah, that wasn't our first question.
That is? Well, that's the question I have here.
I'm totally kidding. Hi, I'm Lindsay Fitzgerald. I am with Gevo. So Gevo is a really amazing company, and I say that not because I've been there for 4 years, but because what we're doing is changing the world. So we are a cost-competitive renewable fuels and chemicals and carbon abatement producer. Today, we have a footprint in North Dakota. We have a footprint in Iowa where we're producing low-carbon ethanol with on-site CCS as well as RNG. In the future, what we're working towards is sustainable aviation fuel from that ethanol. So in South Dakota and in North Dakota and hopefully around the world. The other thing that comes along with that, because we're talking about a global marketplace, the panel before was talking about carbon credits and CI score, we have to be able to monitor and report and verify the carbon intensity and what's happening through that supply chain to all of our buyers. So we have a subsidiary, Verity, that does all of that with us so that when we say we have this jet fuel, it was produced from this corn grown in this field, and this is the chain that has happened, and now you have it. And now you know, and if you're buying the carbon from that, now you know where that carbon came from.
That's great. And you obviously work at the intersection of fuels, aviation, agriculture. Could you talk to me a little bit about how you see the kind of energy security and emissions reductions dynamics of this kind of playing together?
Sure. So for what it's worth, I came into the space 18 years ago. I started with the RFS. So we were in a space then where we were looking at how do we increase our energy security? How do we have more domestic production of fuels, renewable fuels, to help broaden our pool? We're in that same space again today. I don't know if we ever really left, but we're here. And so what we're doing really is looking at how do we take this existing ethanol that we have grown up from nothing to the next level? How do we take it and use it for something even better? We're seeing a decline in ethanol needs, and we're seeing an increase in the demand for jet fuel. We're all still flying. But guess what? We're not building any new refineries. So that means we're not refining any new jet fuel. So instead of importing, which we're importing jet fuel today, we can take the existing ethanol infrastructure that we have, and we can work with agriculture, make ag better, and take that ethanol and convert it into sustainable aviation fuel. And then we have it here. We can export it if we need to. We can export the technology. We're actively looking at locations in Europe to do this and elsewhere. So this is a huge play because we need to support farmers. We need to support the ag community. I don't think a day goes by that you don't see an article about where ag stands today. We are producing more and more on less acres of land with less inputs. This is great. This is wonderful. But how do we find more markets for all of these different co-products? As a reminder to folks, we're not taking the whole kernel of corn and turning it into ethanol. And that corn that you had this summer is not the corn we're using. So I just want to make sure that everybody gets that. So we're taking the starch out of that kernel of corn, that's getting fermented into ethanol to jet fuel. We're taking that protein, and that goes into the animal feed market, and that goes around the world. And then we're taking that corn oil out as well, and because we're fermenting through this process, we have CO2 that we can sequester, we can utilize. CO2 has a number of uses. So how do we make sure that we're monetizing all of these co-products to give a better balance in the marketplace for the farmer, the producer, and those buyers?
So everyone's aware of the criticism of, for example, COP or Davos or whatever it might be, with people that talk a lot about climate change and then will fly in with their private jet and kind of be a disproportionate contributor to the very emissions that they're talking about. But that's the problem that you guys are helping solve, right? With the aviation kind of market looking for these new sustainable alternatives. What do you see as the global trends? Like, where's the demand? What can the U.S. be doing to export more of this to the rest of the world?
Yeah, so we're obviously seeing some policy here. We've got 45Z in place that recognizes sustainable aviation fuel. We can play within the RFS as well, and we have growing volumes there. There are mandates elsewhere. We're looking in the UK. We've got a trade mission there we've all heard about today. We have a mandate in Europe as well. And we're talking through Asia about additional policies. So there's pull around the world for this, but it's all still new, and we're all still trying to respond. You don't build a whole new facility from scratch or add on to an existing ethanol facility overnight. So this takes time. It takes some policy stability, key. Don't put something in place and then a year later change it because no one's responded. I don't have time to respond to that yet. So there needs to be that policy consistency, but we're seeing it, and we're seeing it coming from the airlines. We're seeing it coming from those corporates of those airlines that they want to be involved. They see that they're going to need this, and they want to contribute.
I feel like people have been talking about this concept of sustainable aviation fuel for a while. There's new companies like yours that are really trying to be on the cutting edge of this. What would you say are some of the most exciting developments that you're seeing that have happened kind of recently or that you're looking forward to in the near future?
Okay. So GEVO has been around for almost 17 years. We have been working towards this. We're just finally getting there. Facebook reminded me that I went to a SAF event in Atlanta 9 years ago. I wasn't with GEVO then, but we've been working towards this. So we're getting there. But it's that 45Z that's exciting, because now we're not only recognizing the gallon, we're recognizing the carbon intensity from it. We're recognizing that performance that encourages people to do better. The RFS was phenomenal because it said we need gallons. And now we're saying we need gallons, but we need gallons that mean more and offset more when we're in a world and talking about carbon intensity and the importance of carbon intensity.
So you mentioned 45Z. What are the other policy levers or mechanisms that are important to a company like yours?
So we care about 45Z, we care about RFS, we care about policy that impacts farmers. So when we're looking at our feedstock, we are looking and we're actively working with our farmers to say, what can you do on your land to make this better, make this soil better? Can you do low-till or no-till? Can you have less inputs on your land? How can you do more with less? That's a way to impact their bottom line, but that also means that they're supplying us with corn that comes in with a lower carbon intensity. Going through our process, that also means now we end up with a lower carbon intensity fuel. We can capture more of that 45Z value and share it back through the supply chain. So we very, very much care about what's happening in the ag community and with farmers. We care what's happening around the world in terms of global policy. If you're looking at Europe and you're looking elsewhere on global policy, they don't necessarily want to see ag-based products. They don't want to see US-based products coming in. They have this vision that we're taking corn off the table. So there's a food, they're not recognizing that it's food and fuel. They have this vision of agriculture from, a Dust Bowl time that is not agriculture today. It's not innovative, it's not modern. And so there's this huge educational push that we have to do as a country, as a group, to say our ag is not what you think it is. It's not terrible, it's wonderful. And if you look at this, you have a potential to help play along and help pull this along. So I think there's just this real opportunity to get out there and educate about what we have today so that our fuel, as we're producing it, can actually go into these markets.
Awesome. I'm debating, we have 47 seconds left. Do you want one more question, or?
Go for it.
We saw a few days ago McDonald's announced the largest regenerative ag investment in American history from a private company, $200 million. You mentioned no-till, cover crops, the things that are kind of having a moment right now. How does regen ag kind of fit into the broader biofuels conversation?
Yeah, so it helps increase the value at the end of the day. So we're able to pay farmers more when we are receiving more. So when there's a carbon intensity based program, the better they do, the better I do, the better that we can all share that. It's not your traditional, I just need a gallon and we're good to go. We care about the carbon intensity and how to keep driving it down.
Wonderful. That was perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, we're going to go along to Jackie Siebens, the Director of Public Affairs at Helion Energy. Welcome.
Hello, hello.
Hello. I think you probably know the drill by now.
Yeah.
Who are you and what do you do?
Great. First, just thanks for bringing us all together. I have learned a ton today already. Especially, that was fantastic, Lindsay. I had no idea you guys were doing all that. So I'm Jackie Siebens. I'm the Director of Public Affairs at Helion Energy, and we are a fusion company based out in Washington State. We were founded around 12 years ago. With the mission to deploy commercial fusion to the grid and around the world as soon as possible. And everything that we do at the company is driven by that goal. In large part, we chose our concept, our design for our fusion systems based off of that goal. So if you are familiar with fusion at all, you've probably heard of ITER, however you want to pronounce it, the very, very large international project going on in France. This has been underway for decades, really, at this point, and the facility itself is twice the size of Disneyland. And so not something that you think of when you think of a scalable energy solution. At Helion, we believe that as an industry, not just fusion, but an energy industry, we have to move to a place where we're building generation facilities like airplanes, not like airports. And so that's really woven into our mission as a company. And so we're actually pursuing something called a pulsed fusion approach. And just to make this as simple as I possibly can, really quickly, fission power, you're splitting atoms to make heat to spin a turbine, make electricity. Fusion, you're forcing particles that don't like each other together to create energy. In our system, we're doing fusion in short, rapid bursts, around a millisecond each, over and over again to create electricity. In most designs and in most approaches to fusion over the many decades it's been underway, it's been a sustained fusion reaction that's been pursued. And this requires you to put materials under extreme conditions of heat and pressure for very long periods of time. The pulsed approach that we're pursuing has allowed us to circumvent most of the physics and materials challenges that still remain for that sustained approach. And so we're a pulsed approach company. We've already built 7 working fusion prototypes in just the 12 years we've been around. Our 7th prototype, called Polaris, we completed construction at the end of last year. We're operating it now, and this is the machine that we've designed to demonstrate electricity production from fusion for the first time. The last thing I'll just say about our company, we signed the world's first power purchase agreement for fusion energy with Microsoft a little over 2 years ago. And we are on track to deliver on time for that in 2028, a 50-megawatt fusion plant that we broke ground on this past summer in Washington State.
Wow, very exciting. Fusion, the holy grail of clean energy, right? Often referred to. I feel like a lot of people say like fusion's great, but it's 30 years away, and that's always kind of been like the joke about it. But it sounds like things are really developing. In addition to like the power purchase agreement you have for the 50 megawatts, I'm curious, like what other signs are there that commercialization is actually getting closer, and what can we be looking for on the horizon?
Great question. I'm going to put a little personal spin on this for a minute because I think it helps sort of explain most people don't know, and there's no reason they should know, that we're as close as we are to commercialization. I worked in the traditional nuclear power space and advanced nuclear power space my whole career before coming over to Helion about 2 years ago. And when I first got the call from Helion to, say, hey, we're interested in having you come start up our public affairs team, I was not interested, honestly, because I thought I really want to work on something that's going to be built in my lifetime. But I agreed to come out and tour. And it completely changed my entire frame of thinking about fusion, and I'll tell you why. So, and this is directly answering your question. So first and foremost, If you know anything about the traditional nuclear space, it takes years to even get a design certification from the regulator. I go out to Helion, and I'm looking at their 6th working fusion prototype, and at the time the company had been around 10 years. And so I'm saying, all right, you've somehow managed to build 6 fusion machines in 10 years. And oh, by the way, the one that I'm looking at right now that did over 10,000 pulses of fusion is sitting in an office park with, I'm not kidding you, something like a chiropractor on one side and like a hairdresser on the other. I know I'm messing that up, but something akin to that. So my nuclear power brain was blown. I mean, I was just like, how are you doing this? And it really all comes down to the materials. Because at the end of the day, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission cares about radioactive materials. And what we're using for our fuel is fundamentally different than what you use in a nuclear power plant. And so we're creating far less radiation. Nuclear Regulatory Commission said, well, then we're going to formally separate how we regulate fusion and fission. And they placed fusion under the same framework they use for hospital equipment. So our machines, all of them, including our current one and our commercial plant that we're building, is licensed and regulated by Washington State's Department of Health. So they know how to do this stuff. And so it's been really incredible to just see that difference. But the other thing I'll just leave you with on this is that our company in part was founded because we believed that 21st century technology has finally evolved to a place to enable 20th century fusion concepts. The physicists have always known this is possible, and they also knew that some of the technologies you'd need to build it and prove it didn't exist yet, including things like power electronics, like semiconductors. And so our company said, we think we have what we need to do this, and that's what helped us go out and build it.
It's really exciting. I feel like it's a pretty unique position to be in where it's like a fundamentally new technology in terms of market availability, right? Wind, solar, oil, gas, like traditional nuclear, they've all been around for forever. Everyone knows them. You're kind of like entering a new stage for something new. A lot of the public doesn't really quite know about it yet because it's just not a very real thing in their lives quite yet. I'm curious what you think, A, of that public dimension, but then also in terms of policy, how do we go from 50 megawatts in 2028 to like gigawatt scale nuclear fusion in this country?
I'm glad that we got to that question because I'm looking at the timer and I'm like, I got to talk about this. So, okay, our ultimate goal is to scale as rapidly as possible. I'm just going to say right now a hard truth. We are brilliant at inventing things in this country. America always envisions the future first. But when it comes to scaling those inventions and actually delivering and building the factories and the jobs here, we are losing our edge if we haven't already lost it. And what we are most concerned about is that we want to make sure that we're building fusion here and that it's America that's reaping the economic and strategic benefits from this technology. Because at the end of the day, if we make the same mistakes, to be blunt, that we have with other technologies, inventing solar here in the US, factories are built in China, same thing with chips, we're talking about losing the strategic advantage of the century if we do that with fusion. And so I am thrilled to report that today, there was a new bill introduced in the House, led by Representative Carol Miller from West Virginia, with 3 additional sponsors on House Ways and Means Committee, to expand the 45X clean energy manufacturing tax credit to include fusion components. We are beyond excited about this because at the end of the day, what we need to see happen right now is while the paradigm shift is already underway in the fusion space, we're moving from an academic sort of paradigm to a commercial paradigm. We need the government to come with us on this. And we need to be thinking about what should the role of the federal government be as we are lifting a commercial fusion industry. And this is exactly what it looks like. It's proactive measures, like making sure that manufacturing tax credits are available to the suppliers in this country for fusion so that we can scale as we work towards demonstration. Because the real race is not actually who gets to demonstration first. It's who is actually able to scale this quickly.
And that seems exactly the role for government policy, right? Is to help bridge that very real valley of death for these technologies. If you go to a university like MIT, probably the most advanced university in terms of coming up with these innovations, you go to their labs, they're the most amazing concepts that they prove there, and then they don't go anywhere. They don't get commercialized. I think part of that is, I don't know if you've read the book Abundance, but they talk about part of it is that we kind of suck at taking the hard science that we do and turning that into actual products and scaling it. And so my last question here is, China, obviously our primary geopolitical adversary, I think you put Russia second to that. what are they doing on fusion? Like, is this something they're investing in, and are we behind? How far are we behind?
Yes. Okay. So I'll give you some hard numbers here. China is, probably not to anyone's surprise in this room, investing a lot more money, government funding, than we are here. Just over the last 3 years, we're talking about $6.5 billion. Now, a lot of that is going towards research facilities where they're looking to build demonstration fusion generators. But they are also simultaneously beating us soundly at building out the infrastructure to support a fusion marketplace, including the supply chain. I'll be honest with you, the industry is still far too dependent on China right now for some of the most critical components in our supply chain. And so now is the moment to say to ourselves, okay, what do we already produce in this country that we need to scale up quickly to make sure that we're leading on that? What can we work with our allies on to make sure that we're friendshoring as much of this as we can? And then really working to identify early days here. Are there things we need to consider for tariff relief or ways to make it easier to get these first few, first of a kind plants off the ground so that first of a kind becomes first of many? Because that's what it's going to take to actually win the real race here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Y'all are doing great on this timing. All right, next we have Alessandra Milliken, Managing Director of Energy and Infrastructure at Landgate. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. I'm excited to talk to you because you occupy a little bit of a different space within the energy kind of conversation than some of the previous companies we've heard from. Could you tell us a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, so Landgate, we are a data and analytics company. We have thousands of data points for every single parcel in the United States. So ownership data, transmission lines, basically substations, where all the infrastructure is, but also analysis on that. So available transfer capacity, available offtake capacity, which a lot of data centers are looking at. We also do valuations on every single parcel in the United States. So you can see, hey, is this parcel better suited for solar energy or wind development? What can I expect to pay in leases for this parcel? And then also things like competitive activity, what solar projects are in the area, and what parcels they're exactly mapped to. So we basically take what used to be a very laborious, monotonous, time-consuming process and put it in one place. You can go from the beginning and end of your energy project and do everything within Landgate.
I feel like this is a part of the energy conversation that is so underrated because having a lot more energy means building a lot more things, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a very real estate component to all of that. I'm curious what you see as the challenges, but also the opportunities in like connecting energy and AI to the real estate demands that they have.
Yeah, so we kind of fit in very well to this question because the race for AI and this data center gold rush is a race for real estate, and Landgate is the only company that is at the intersection of both real estate and energy. And just for context, the data center companies now are basically asking for enough electricity to power 100 million homes, which is 20% more than our top summer, capacity. So we have a big problem ahead of us, and a lot of the project developers that I've had the pleasure of working with have seen just their projects die death by 1,000 cuts, that they have to go through this permitting process and the environmental reviews, and many of them have never seen their projects come to completion. So we're going to see that with data centers, and right now data centers are trying to get their hands on real estate as quickly as possible to lock those down, but also look at, hey, where is there excess energy that I can pull off the grid to power my data center, because we have that energy problem coming up.
Yeah, you mentioned permitting and the challenges that imposes on all these energy projects. There's a lot that needs to be done on the government side, right, to streamline the processes, to make it faster, to limit the judicial kind of impact on projects. But there's also like the private sector innovation that you guys are leading on. Talk to me a little bit about what increasing modernization could look like. How can data and technology help on that private sector side of speeding up these projects?
Yeah, so I guess I'll take a step back and tell you a little bit about me. I started my career in traditional oil and gas. I was a exploration geologist who focused in the Eagle Ford Shale, and I was out there with a paper map and a pen, and hours were lost trying to find our way in these leases that were in the middle of nowhere in cartel territory, and drillers had the same problem. So I would always say, hey, why can't we use a digital map for this? This is kind of ridiculous. And it was just the way they did things for 50 years, and they weren't going to change. And in 2020, when all of us started working remotely from home, a lot of the oil companies were in a really bad place because they hadn't embraced digital modernization. And on the other hand, you have companies who did. ExxonMobil, they cut their operational costs by 15% by using an automated well system. You have companies like Ocean Infinity who use roves instead of sending people to do deep sea exploration, things that were unprecedented. And what I've loved about transitioning to renewable energy is that almost every company embraces technology and embraces, hey, how can we do things better? But that is still ahead of us and something we can continue to embrace, because I think looking backwards and planning forwards is going to help us out.
Are there any things that governments, whether it's the federal government or state or local governments, can do to help make your job easier within that?
Yes, a lot. I was at my mom's house recently, and my mom has a bit of a problem with keeping a lot of stuff, and I saw something that hopefully not many of us are familiar with, but a rotary phone that you dial. And I asked her, Debbie, why are we keeping this, girlfriend? But we right now are basically trying to operate the modern internet on that rotary phone. So we have two problems that are pretty big that we need to deal with. One is grid modernization, and the other is interconnection reform. So I wish I could snap my hands and fix that problem. There are a lot smarter people than me trying to solve that, but in my opinion, it's like the 4 Ps that we could basically fix to address those. So it's planning, permitting, payment, and people. When we look at the basically highway grid, that's planned by national agencies and provided such. Our transmission lines get killed at state boundaries. And if you're an electron, you don't care where state boundaries are. You just go where we send you. For example, we had the Pattern Energy SunZia transmission line that went from just New Mexico to Arizona, 550 miles. It got approval finally after 17 years of being stuck in permitting, which is a little bit ridiculous, a project that would bring America energy. We have that same problem now where, typically states will argue over, well, I don't want to pay for this, you pay for that, what's my community going to benefit from? So I think if we gave, FERC the authority to nationally regulate that process, that would help out. Same thing with permitting. We could put the transmission lines along highways or along railroads that are already known, recognized environmental concerns, and cut that permitting process in half, or cut a lot of that red tape in half. It's a lot of bureaucracy that happens that slows us down, and especially with data centers and this AI gold rush that we have, we need to fix this to be a powerhouse for American energy. The last thing I mentioned was people. So in communities, a lot of the landowners I've spoken with, they actually don't mind how a wind turbine looks. What bothers them is knowing that your neighbor is making a lot of money when you're getting $0. And coming from oil and gas, when everyone was making $13 million a month in oil and gas lease revenue just to drive through their property, everyone was pretty happy. So I think looking at those communities and coming up with some sort of standardization or, hey, let's benefit the entire community here would help that process out a lot.
Yeah, I'm really curious about the site selection component of what you do. It sounds like you can help on the permitting side, right? Mm-hmm. Getting to sites that are going to be easier to permit and have fewer kind of maybe environmental downsides. I'm also curious, I feel like a lot of the opposition that you see to renewables are either like local people being upset about like the visuals of it or whatever it might be. Whether it's like solar using up prime farmland as a concern, environmentalists that might have concern about wind turbines and like flight patterns for birds or whatever it might be. I'm curious from like a conservation and environmental perspective, is your technology able to help developers kind of mitigate some of those concerns that people have?
Yeah, absolutely. And just since I joined renewable energy, that process has changed so much. You have agrivoltaics where, Kit Fox communities actually do better with the solar farms there because they have protection from hawks. So in our platform, yes, they're able to look at, solar and wind ordinances. Where do the communities not want that kind of power and kind of work around it? You can look at voting maps to see, what communities typically are pro or anti your type of energy. And also, again, with the data race, where data centers are popping up that you could partner with and kind of go behind the meter. So a lot of great information. If you're a project developer, you're looking at thousands of data points. And I've had one user who said, hey, Landgate has taken my process where I'm going to 14 different websites, 4 hours to 30 minutes. I can have everything in one place and manage that entire process from beginning to end.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, Allison.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
All right, last but definitely not least, we have Leslie Gentarasamy, Vice President of Research at the Smart Electric Power Alliance. Good to see you again.
Great to be here. Thank you all for sticking with us. We're going to bring this panel home. 10 minutes or less. Let's do this.
Let's do this. All right, well, you know the drill. Let's start with what do you do and what are you working on?
Yeah, definitely. So Smart Electric Power Alliance is actually a nonprofit. So, different from other panelists here, but we work with all segments of the power industry. So we're national in scope. We focus on real-world energy solutions grounded in the experiences of our member utilities, energy and technology companies, and state regulatory agencies and state policymakers. So we're really focused on that intersection where clean power meets customer. So how do we think about those ideas, those technologies, those policies and programs that can really enable clean power to get deployed on the grid today and in the future?
Yeah, utilities always have to balance a lot of different things, right? Like you have the customers and there's the reliability part, there's the affordability part, but then increasingly also the decarb part, right? Like how do you guys help utilities kind of navigate those three different elements of energy?
It's all about that balance. So our members and the power industry as a whole is really looking for where are those solutions, where are those innovations that can help advance the deployment of clean, reliable, resilient, and affordable electricity. And in this moment, we find ourselves in, our panel talked a lot about the load growth challenges and the data center needs, the AI, opportunity that this economy has. And if we don't have power available for that, we're not going to be able to seize this opportunity in this moment. And so SEPA really looks to identify where we can work with the industry to advance those solutions. So we think 5 years ahead and thinking about long duration energy storage, new technologies that can enable clean power like geothermal and other things in the renewable energy space where we see opportunity to bring those new resources online, so on the supply side. But we're also really interested in because of the challenges of today, where is there opportunity to get more out of the existing system? Because we need to move electrons as fast as possible to the places that need them, and the way that we can do that in a very quick amount of time or quickly as possible is to utilize the existing system. And so when I talk about that, I'm really talking about a suite of technologies and software solutions that are really popping up more and more in the utility space, where we're talking about harnessing the power of distributed energy resources. So these are things already in people's houses, like smart thermostats. How many folks here in this room have a Nest in their house, right? How many people are thinking about, maybe I'll put a battery backup on my house? So stuff like that, where the grid already has resources and infrastructure available to it, where we can harness that through operations and system software that acts as kind of the brain of that distribution grid, where we can orchestrate across all of those small little sources of power and aggregate it up into what essentially acts as a supply side resource. So these are often called virtual power plants. I didn't come up with that name. I don't, it is what it is. Sometimes called distributed power plants, but these are actually incredibly innovative technology solutions that utilities are looking at to drive down costs across the system, because you don't need to deploy a bunch of new infrastructure. We already heard how difficult it is to build new transmission lines, to build new generation. I think we are focused on how to ensure that all of those things happen, across the timeline of what's needed. But today there are solutions at hand that are commercial, that are in operation, that we can leverage.
So we've heard a lot about the AI gold rush and the constraints that's placing on the grid. We have heard about the economic and geopolitical necessity of more energy abundance. But to some extent, if you have an outdated grid, you just can't really do much with that, right? Like grid modernization really seems to be one of the big issues we have here. For those of you who don't know in the room, there's currently more energy that is stuck in interconnection queues in terms of a clean energy than is actually on the grid because of some of those grid challenges that we're experiencing. And so I'm curious, are you seeing any developments either on the market side or on the technological side that are helping with that grid modernization?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think interconnection queues is a great example of kind of why it's so important to have this engagement at every level of policy, where federal, down to state and regional levels are thinking through how do we get more electricity on the grid, how do we ensure that the system as a whole is moving forward and through that grid modernization. And the interconnection process is really actually a beneficiary of all of the AI development that's happening today. So there's been an announcement where Google is partnering with PJM, one of the regional transmission operators, to implement AI solutions and try to speed up those processes. So although AI and data centers are often talked about as, well, this is some of the reason why we're in this kind of challenging space where we need more and more electricity, it's also part of the solution set. And so we're really looking through kind of that broad set of ideas on how to utilize new technologies for these types of things. Other things to think about include grid load forecasting, modeling improvements, different things like that that can help speed up that time to process those applications and get more grid projects greenlit.
And so from a policy perspective, what have you seen are the tools that have been most helpful so far, and what are the tools that are still missing that policy or good policy could help with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in this day, we hear a lot about how there's uncertainty, there's a need for additional kind of runway time to understand how policy can support the deployment of new clean energy. But we're really, because we have a focus on the states, we're still seeing a lot of progress happening, a lot of interest in pushing forward on low emissions, decarbonized energy, that is also answering that question about how do you balance the need for reliable and affordable. And so through the focus on states, we're still seeing clean energy standards, renewable portfolio standards, energy efficiency resource standards, those types of policy tools being used to indicate to the industry that these are priorities. We're seeing energy storage targets coming out in certain jurisdictions. And then policymakers and utility regulators are thinking through how to enable those technologies like I was describing earlier on virtual power plants and harnessing the kind of demand side and distributed energy resources that are available through just basic de-risking. So a lot of this is, it's new, I don't know if I want to approve it. I don't know if customers, will bear any, undue costs of these things. And so some of it is about getting comfort and familiarity with what these technologies can offer and ensuring that, the policy discussion can build off of that and have real world pilots that show and demonstrate the benefits of these things so that more regulators are comfortable with approving those types of projects.
So what's the global aspect of this? I feel like these are challenges that countries around the world are starting to deal with. How can the U.S. be a leader domestically and then kind of export some of that to the rest of the world?
Yeah, definitely. SEPA is a national nonprofit based here in the U.S., but we have global interests and partners. And so when we think about the solutions that the U.S. energy grid needs, we want to be informed by the best solutions that are happening globally. So one of our pillars of the work that we do is to bring those insights back to the United States. We are actually going to Portugal this year on a delegation, a fact-finding mission to figure out, what's going on in the clean energy space. It just so happens, obviously, that a lot of folks have heard about the Iberian Peninsula blackout. That was a big deal because of the scale of what happened there. And so those reliability events, we want to understand, what the parameters of those, what are some of the things that the United States has put into place to prevent those types of events, and then how can we learn from one another's systems. But I think the point earlier about technology diffusion and how can we export U.S. technology, innovation and leadership to other countries is also incredibly important. We had the Inter-American Development Bank reach out to SEPA asking us, what are your members' experiences with data centers? Because in Latin America, they're seeing folks come to them and say, I want to develop data centers and take advantage of some of the resources here. And so they want to make sure that they understand the U.S. experience. So there's a lot to learn and kind of that peer-to-peer exchange that we can help facilitate.
Awesome. Very quick last question. I feel like another part of the energy conversation that is not talked enough about is the cybersecurity aspect of this, right? We saw the Colonial Pipeline that was hacked, and we already know our adversaries are trying to wreak havoc on our already fragile grid. What's the cyber component of the work that you guys are doing?
Yeah, we have working groups where we sit down with our utility members and our energy technology company members and really hash through these exact questions. So it's really about those on the ground solutions that are working in different utility jurisdictions. And I think what's unique about the work that SEPA does is that it cuts across all of the different types of utilities. So there's large investor-owned utilities down to rural electric co-ops and municipally owned utilities, and they're all slightly different. They all have different models. They all have different regulatory regimes, and so and depending on where you are in the country, your state policy environment is different. And so we can kind of cut across all of that and say, highlight and pull out what are the best solutions that are working across all of these things. And cyber is one of those that's incredibly important for the health of the industry, because we don't want to implement solutions, especially so many of these advanced technologies do require digital and kind of grid or internet connected devices. And so we have to have that as part of the conversation.
Awesome, thank you. I've reliably been informed that we are the last thing between you and an amazing dinner tonight before Heather comes up as well. But thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Leslie, for being our last one.
Thanks, Chris.